All right, thank you and welcome everyone. I am John Sager with Evercore ISI alongside my bald amigo and mobility partner in crime, Chris McNally. Today we're very happy to welcome Nikola's CFO, Kim Brady. As most of you know, Nikola came public earlier this year through a reverse merger with a SPAC led by Steve Gursky, who became their chairman earlier this week. Nikola is focused on sustainable transportation through a combination of hydrogen vehicles and their network, and BEV, and as we'll learn more about in the conversation to come. The potential to increasingly become a transportation as a service, full service provider in long haul dedicated trucking. More recently, Nikola has signed a deal with GM for production of their fuel and battery cells on GM's Ultium platform in what has been, let's call it an eventful last few weeks for the company, to say the least. With that, we'll kick it over to Kim for a couple of opening comments.
Good morning, John and Chris. We are excited to be on your fireside chat. It has been eventful last couple of weeks. As you know, we have always focused on partnering to ensure that we can reduce execution risk, and GM announcement was strong momentum for us. With respect to the Hindenburg report, as well as Trevor Milton's resignation, as you know, the company had provided very comprehensive response to the Hindenburg report last Monday, about a week ago. And then since then, there's been many discussions with Trevor as he contemplated in terms of his next move. This is Trevor's baby. He founded the company. He's absolutely passionate, but it became increasingly clear that the attention was being focused on Trevor rather than on the company, as well as company's mission. And after much deliberation, he made a decision to tender resignation last Sunday, and the board accepted. Steve Gursky, who is a former vice chairman of GM, as well as member of the board, agreed to step up and serve as chairman of the company, not an executive chairman, but chairman. We are grateful for Steve Gursky and his willingness to do that. He's very well grounded in Nicola. He was also CEO and chairman of Vector IQ, and he helped orchestrate the business combination between Vector IQ, which was a SPAC, and Nicola. And as a part of that, Steve actually brought an army of former GM engineers to perform due diligence. And Steve feels absolutely confident that due diligence was thorough. And as you think about Nicola over time and all the strategic partners that we've had, Bosch was a very early investor. In fact, they were the lead investor in Series B and Series C. And I can tell you that Bosch was incredibly thorough in terms of their due diligence. As you know, Bosch is known for their discipline, and very early they understood that they need to work with Nicola, especially developing next generation propulsion when it came to e-axle, e-motor, inverters, as well as fuel cell. So that was very important for them, and we have been able to file several patents with Bosch in terms of co-development of those efforts. Also, in 2019, when we began our private round for Series D, CNHI became our lead investor. We wanted to make sure that we de-risked manufacturing process. And once again, that due diligence was very thorough. CNHI hired Goldman Sachs for valuation, McKinsey for business opportunity and business review, and Deloitte for accounting and review, and Sullivan Cromwell for legal review. So once again, it was a very thorough process. There were engineers who were on our site and meeting with all of their counterparts with respect to various disciplines in terms of actually producing and manufacturing the vehicle. So we feel very confident about due diligence that's been performed by our partners. And as you can see, our partners have been 100% supportive and behind us. So we are grateful to move forward. And this is a a great time for Nikola to focus on execution, and we are prepared to do that.
Thanks. Kim, obviously I appreciate the candor on Trevor and Steve Gursky stepping up as chairman. One of the areas that we would love to hone in on is this idea of, what was the company and what were some of the statements made, let's call it 2016 to 2018, versus where the company is today. And if you can highlight some of those partnerships that you've discussed, but, particularly you mentioned Bosch, but I think investors would also like to know Evercore, and then anything you could say about GM and you mentioned the word support, but has anything changed, obviously, given the drastic changes in the company over the last couple of weeks?
Sure. Clearly, nothing has changed, and you saw a statement by GM supporting Nikola, as well as Bosch and CNHI confirmed that they are actually manufacturing our prototypes right now, which will be completed by end of September for Nikola Tre, and will be tested in Ulm, Germany. And there will be a second batch of test trucks that will be manufactured between October through first part of 2021. And we are looking to place some of those testing trucks with potential customers. So that is going very, very well. When you think about 2016, of course, that's prior to my time. But I can tell you that for folks that were present at the event, clearly understood that the truck was a short truck and it was not moving under its own propulsion. I have spoken with one of my largest investors of Nikola, who was present at that event, and he clearly understood that was a short truck. I understand that there may be some different views in terms of what Trevor may have stated. Anyone who's involved in the automotive world understand when a truck is first introduced, it's a short truck. While it may have functional parts, it's not running under its own propulsion. We have made that very clear in our response. We believe that when you think about Nikola, what you should think about is Nikola 2, which is a fuel cell truck prototype that we have unveiled at Nikola World. And that truck is under own propulsion. We have demonstrated many times, including dozens of pipe investors who came to Arizona to see the truck and actually also ride in the truck. And we have demonstrated delivery of beer for Anheuser-Busch. So we recommend that investors really focus on the future and what we have delivered and what we're going to deliver. And we have been very clear the timeline for Nikola Tre, 100% battery electric truck, which will be available for customers starting Q4 of 2021. If you think about what we have achieved and what we have committed at the last earnings call, we have clearly laid out milestones as well as goalposts, and we have stated that 4 key milestones for the second half of 2020. One, to announce a major and significant BEV truck order, which we accomplished shortly after the earnings by announcing the largest refuse truck, which is an ideal application for short-haul battery electric truck, and that we would identify and announce a partnership for the Badger with an OEM, which we have done that. We have also stated that by end of 2020, we will have a hydrogen collaboration partner, and that substantial refurbishment of our own facility, which is a joint venture with Evercore on their own campus, will be completed, and that facility is on track to be completed with lines to manufacture Nikola Tre by middle of next year. But the refurbishment will be substantially completed by end of 2020. We are consistent in terms of what we have stated, and we believe that we'll be able to achieve what we have laid out.
Okay, and Kim, one more from me, and then I'm going to pass it over to John, who's going to go through the fuel cell transportation business and also lead the Q&A. But I think one of the biggest debates around Nikola is this idea, at one point the company said X, Y, and Z can be done through internal R&D, and now it appears you may use more external suppliers than previously, communicated. Could we talk about that idea of internal versus external tech? And, specifically, what parts of Nikola's technology do you think are proprietary, maybe best in class, or, just give you an advantage over other new entrants or competitors?
Chris, we have always stated very clearly, if you look at our S4 filing as well as our 10Q, we have stated that ultimately we are an OEM and that we will assemble, integrate, and commission our trucks. Most of our components will be manufactured by third party, even if it's our design and engineering. And it's important to distinguish that. I understand that some may view that somehow that we were looking to manufacture most of our components. That's simply not true. No one does that. When you think about global supply chain for automotive industry is highly sophisticated. For example, PACCAR, they will use the Cummins engine, and they will use transmission from Allison Transmission. They may be using axle from Danacorp. And so this is very common practice. What we have stated is that when it comes to propulsion, that's very important for us. We want to be able to influence and control that from engineering perspective, but that will not be manufactured by us because it doesn't make any sense. Think about Apple iPhones. They don't manufacture a single part, but they control design and functionality and user interface. To give you an illustration, let's take Nikola Tre BEV as an example. As you know, we partnered with Iveco. And so as we think about the components, cab, they already do that. And so there's no reason for us to actually do work on cab. Truck chassis, that's Iveco. When we think about e-drive and rear axle, that's Nikola. We designed it, we engineered it, we are industrializing together with FPT. Ultimately, FPT and other suppliers will manufacture it. But it's our design, it's our engineering. This is very important for us that we continue to influence it. In terms of batteries and BMS, we want to influence that. And it's our design at the pack level. Bat cooling and electronics, that's all Nikola. When it comes to kind of system integration, vehicle auxiliaries, kind of e-brake steering, that's Iveco. When we get to infotainment, ADAS, that's Nikola. HVAC, that's Iveco. Functional safety, that's Nikola and Iveco. When it comes to fuel cell for Europe, we have stated that Bosch will industrialize for us, but it's co-developed. Bosch and Nikola own co-development with respect to the fuel cell system. But in terms of actually industrializing it and manufacturing, it's responsibility of Bosch because it will take billions of dollars to actually manufacture that and scale it. And it's important for Bosch to own the next generation powertrain. And we want Bosch to be able to manufacture hundreds of thousands of fuel cell systems per year. And that's really important. And the only way you can do that is for a large manufacturer. Bosch is incredibly good at manufacturing, but they recognized early on when it came to design and innovation and disruption that they would be far better off in terms of working with a small company like Nikola. I can tell you that when Bosch was involved in the initial investment for Series B, which was very early back in 2017, they brought an army of PhDs and engineers in terms of performing due diligence. So the reason why I went into detail by systems and subsystems is to show you it's actually a very coordinated process. And we have never represented that we make every component. We don't. In fact, we don't want to manufacture almost most of the components. However, when it comes to next generation propulsion, we want to absolutely influence that and control it. To illustrate, Nikola tray has a very similar dimension to Iveco S-Way, which is the latest homologated truck in the world. Iveco introduced it in 2019 in July. So if you think about Nikola tray, we are using validated and homologated Iveco parts where we can access them at Iveco price. So almost 85 to 90% of the content is all Iveco, but these are commodity parts that has a value of essentially 15%. Nikola is responsible for electric propulsion components that represent about 15% in terms of volume, but represent 85% in terms of value. And so those are the areas that we focus. But ultimately, that doesn't mean that we are actually going to manufacture it ourselves. So for example, for battery, as you know, everybody purchases battery cells from either Samsung, SK, Hynix, Panasonic, LG, CATL. But then you put that into modules and ultimately in the packs. So we try to control that pack design. When it comes to e-axle, it's our design, our engineering. We're industrializing it together with FPT. However, FPT is responsible for actually manufacturing it. So even for the components and the electric propulsion that we control, when it comes to actual manufacturing, it will be manufactured by third party. Of course, when you think about electric propulsion, there's also, BMS system, electric control for the vehicle. That's all that we do with respect to software as well as infotainment.
Great, thank you. I think that was a great answer and very detailed, and will allow a little bit of calm to wash over the waters. If we think about the 14K plus reservation list for the Nikola tray, how many are hard orders similar to the 2,500 from Republic Services?
John, great question. We have been very clear from the beginning and including in our filings, out of 14,000, that's all reservations except for Anheuser-Busch contract. As you know, we purposely frozen the reservation book so that we can focus on what we call just corporate dedicated route customers. Out of 14,000 orders, about 5,000 represent what we call regional customers and mom and pop operators that will not see our trucks for many, many years. And the remaining represent about 9,000 trucks, which are principally corporate customers. Right now, all of our conversations with corporate customers, dedicated route corporate customers, represent where we are focusing on binding orders as well as significant deposits about a year away from actual delivery, and we have committed second half of 2023 for hydrogen fuel cell truck delivery. We will be requiring every order to be binding as well as significant deposits. So we are starting to communicate with existing fuel cell truck customers that they will have to go binding as well as deposits, probably about a year away from 2023. With respect to fuel cell truck, we have also made it clear to Anheuser-Busch that we will be able to deliver, B sample by towards the end of 2021, early 2022, and then we'll go into various validation and testing, and that pre-production truck, will be available at some point end of 2022, early 2023, and then second half of the year will be production version of fuel cell truck.
Okay, and then another area of sort of key area of debate is about the conversion math around hydrogen. Rough estimates, somewhere around 80 to 85% of the cost of producing hydrogen is just the cost of electricity. So it's sort of an extremely important variable in the equation. You guys are talking about targeting $30 to $40 per megawatt hour, which is, a touch lower than costs at the market today, but sort of in line with projections from the US EIA. If we consider alternative generation like wind and solar intended for generation purposes. So how do you think about, how do you get comfort over those assumptions? And then how do we think about this cost, assuming those assumptions, relative to diesel at 250 a gallon?
Sure. When you think about diesel at 250 per gallon, that's at this point. Whenever you're thinking about diesel, I think you have to look at 3-year average or 5-year average because it tends to be, volatile. And that's one of the value that we bring in our one bundle price lease for fuel cell truck, which is highly different than our battery truck, how we sell it, because there is no hydrogen ecosystem in place. And so we are bundling truck repair and maintenance as well as fuel. And our value proposition to our potential customers, and these are all corporate customers where their TCO runs probably about $1 per mile up to $1.20. We have seen some as high as $1.30. But what we guarantee them is that you got fixed price lease over 7 years. And what that means is that we got to make sure that we are able to deliver hydrogen at the right price. And we believe that right price is, sub $3. And as you pointed out, John, the biggest variable, especially from operating perspective, to achieve that is really cost of electricity. When we think about cost of electricity, as you know, it all depends on the location. And that's really important. We recognize that in many locations where you have solar and wind or even hydro, that's highly achievable. We know that, sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day, wind doesn't blow 24 hours a day. Ultimately, we'll have to be connected to the grid. So we're not suggesting that you will be 100% green hydrogen. We believe that's possible towards the end of the decade, but what we are suggesting is that we will use combination of renewables and existing grid power to deliver hydrogen, deliver electricity, such that we can generate hydrogen at sub $3. The key, as you indicated, is can we achieve $35 to $40 in terms of megawatt. The key, we believe, is really helping utilities as well as system operators, the value that Nikola can bring, because we need to generate hydrogen around 21 to 22 hours a day. And we also have on-site hydrogen tank reserve of 30 hours. Essentially, we'll be producing half of hydrogen during nighttime. What that means is that the electricity rate overnight is substantially less than daytime, typically less than half. And what we do is that we actually help utilities generate incremental revenue, because right now they have excess capacity and no revenue at nighttime. And we allow them to actually generate incremental revenue during daytime. Two things that we do. One, at the peak of generation where there's too much supply and not enough demand, we are taking power, because we take massive amounts of power, about 20 megawatts per station. And then in the evening, we are willing to take interruptible power. So at the bottom of the duck curve, when there's greatest demand but not enough supply, we can curtail taking power. So we are a dream customer for any utilities or system operators, because ultimately we help them balance the grid, generate incremental revenue, and we can take interruptible power. And so the rates that we're looking for is not retail rate. Oftentimes we get questions about retail rates that's so much higher. Absolutely, that's correct. But we're not looking for retail rates. We're not looking for industrial rates. We're looking for something akin to wholesale rates. And we believe that once we sit down and when we talk to utilities and system operators, and once they understand the value proposition that we bring, then we can achieve the type of rate that we're looking for. To illustrate an example, the rate that we have been offered in Phoenix, west of Phoenix, on the way to LA, is around 3 cents per kilowatt hour. And so we know that it's quite feasible. And so it's really about locations. We know that in certain parts, like in California, your transmission and distribution cost is much higher. So once you connect to the grid, then all of a sudden your cost could be 6-7 cents kilowatt hour, even though you can actually procure electricity at 2 cents. In those situations, we know that in California, as we generate hydrogen. We'll be able to monetize LCFS credit, which is market-based. In California, they monetized approximately $2.3 billion last year. And based on the formula that's provided, we believe that we can generate anywhere from $5 million to $10 million per station. And we can use that money to offset incremental transmission and distribution price in California and still get back to, net cost of around 3.5 cents.
Okay, so, great. We just have some questions that we want to get to from audience Q&A. The first one is, as an investor in Nikola, I have 3 questions. How many partners is Nikola looking to have for the hydrogen stations? Can you update Nikola investors on the extent of the SEC and DOJ inquiries? And does the departure of Trevor Milton change anything in this regard? And then finally, will Nikola become a subsidiary of one of the larger investors or partners on board, particularly given Steve Gursky's role?
So let me address that. Number one, we have not disclosed how many partners that we may or could have with respect to hydrogen station partnerships. We have made it clear that we are having a number of discussions at multiple levels, meaning at the project level as well as regional level, and perhaps even, joint venture type of discussions. These discussions are being had with utilities, as well as industrial gas players, global energy players, and we have, as well as including truck stop operators. And so we have many discussions at very high level, and ultimately, I think we'll be in a position to disclose how we think about the partnership. Number two, in terms of ultimately, are we looking to, sell to one of our strategic partners? The answer would be no. And the value in terms of partnership is that we are very different than our strategic partners, and our DNA in terms of our culture as well as our innovation and disruption and design, that's helpful to many of existing OEMs. And there's a value that they bring and value that we bring. And because of the partnership, we can drive as well as accelerate transition to zero emission world much quicker rather than Nikola being actually owned by existing OEMs. As you know, that formula doesn't work when you are actually going through a massive disruption in the marketplace. And fundamentally, when you think about Nikola, you are really riding on 2 very important trends. One, electrification and moving towards zero emission for commercial vehicles. And number 2, there's massive decarbonization effort going on in terms of energy transition. And our hydrogen fuel cell truck allows us to actually ride on that wave in terms of energy transition as well as zero emission vehicles. And we could not accomplish that if we were to be actually owned by one of the existing OEMs. When it comes to the SEC, as well as Wall Street Journal's report about the DOJ looking into this, only thing we can comment on is simply that that's what we've heard. And as you know, we proactively contacted the SEC once the Hindenburg report was filed, and we announced that we proactively contacted SEC on Friday. And so we have not heard anything, and so when there's more to disclose, we'll disclose. I think there's one more question that I'm not covering, John.
No, I think you hit all of them perfect. We'll just move on to the next one. Does Nikola have any proprietary hydrogen technology? And if so, how far away is it from being commercially viable?
I guess when you talk about proprietary, I just want to make it clear, generating hydrogen using electrolyzers have been around for the last 70 years. And our partner, NEL, will provide electrolyzers as well as many of the components for the balance of the plant. What NEL has never done is to actually build an 8-ton station that we are talking about. most of their stations are quite small, and it may dispense, 300 to maybe 500 kilograms, not 8,000. So it's not designed for heavy duty. So Nicola has worked with NEL designing heavy duty station. Obviously, that's proprietary. And then when it comes to dispensing protocols, what Nikola has done is that we have assembled a consortium with some of the major players in the world to ensure that we have common standards, because this is good for the world. Unlike battery charging equipment where there is no common standards, what we have strived to do is to establish a common standard for heavy duty dispensing, and which we think is very, very important. And many of the top players, manufacturers, as well as energy players are involved in that. So we think that's really important. What's unique when you think about hydrogen station is that the timing is right. As you know, it's always been a conundrum in terms of advancing the hydrogen economy. But some of the forces, if you think about that are actually propelling it forward now, one, you have some of the most advanced corporate customers who are looking to address sustainability, and they have committed to net zero emission targets. And only way they can achieve that, and the first areas that they look at, is always related to transportation, and that's a big component. And so there's customers are demanding it, number one. Number two, if you look at the regulatory environment, it's highly favorable, and the regulators understand how important this is. In Europe, European Union is investing $1 trillion over the next 10 years and really trying to advance the hydrogen economy. And the emission standards are becoming more restricted all over the world, including the U.S. And so it's going to become more expensive to drive diesel. Not only that, you got ultimately customer demanding zero emission vehicles. Number three, if you think about technology and efficiency, the fuel cell has become more efficient than internal combustion engine. The stacks are around 65%, and we think that will continue to improve. And so even hydrogen fuel cell system has become more efficient. When you think about electrolyzers, they have also become more efficient, 65%. And ultimately, what's also driving this is that you have to think about the cost of electricity, because to generate hydrogen, it takes enormous amount of power. And the cost curve on electricity is also on the right side when you look out what the price is now, what has, and the decline in renewable price has been tremendous for the last 10 years. And you can enter into long-term PPAs for solar and wind at around 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And that cost curve will continue to go down. So you have to kind of think about all these forces lining up to drive the hydrogen economy forward. And it's not simply just one simple technology, because technology has always been there. But there are really important, I would say, 5 forces that have lined up to drive the cost down to generate hydrogen. The reason why we think about on-site generation is that because there is no ecosystem, and the least we believe that to execute and grow hydrogen ecosystem and do that without speculation for first few years will most likely be utilizing on-site generation, because we believe you can achieve the lowest hydrogen generation costs. John, can you?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was muted myself. I think we'll probably wrap it up there. Thank you very much for all the really detailed answers. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for attending. We're on to the next presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.